Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you are very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat. This video is going to be a continuation of my early modern pregnancy and gynecology series, and I will leave a link to the playlist for that series in the description box of this video. Advice for parents, whether they are expectant or otherwise, on pregnancy, childbirth and child rearing has, I think, never been more accessible. Whether you're looking for courses, books, websites, podcasts, even social media posts, those who want that input can engage with the teachings and advice of a whole host of people: paediatricians, child and developmental psychologists, early years educators, other parents, even, apparently on some occasions, cult leaders. The options are seemingly limitless. Parents can define themselves by the particular parenting style they choose to follow. Are they an attachment parent, authoritarian, gentle, crunchy, a tiger mum, or a Disney dad? It is, arguably, no longer accurate to say that children don't come with a manual, because clearly, patently, they do. The problem now is they don't come with one manual, but with hundreds or even thousands, which will frequently conflict with each other. But what did our early modern counterparts have? Let's find out. Let's take a look at the first book on pregnancy, birth and child rearing to be published in English. Let's explore the birth of mankind. The Birth of Mankind, also known as The Woman's Book, was first published in London in 1540. The title page announced that this publication was, quote, newly translated out of Latin into English, in the which is entreated of all such things the which chance to women in their labour, and all such infirmities which happen unto the infants after they be delivered. And also at the latter end, or in the third or last book, is entreated the conception of mankind, and how many ways it may be letted or furthered, with divers other fruitful things, as doth appear in the table before the book. Additionally, this title page lets us know that one Thomas Raynalde had been licensed by the king to be the sole printer of the same. While this edition was dedicated to, quote, our most gracious and virtuous Queen, Catherine, meaning King Henry VIII's fifth wife and queen, Catherine Howard, it was also focused, the reader is informed, on, quote, minding and tendering the utility and wealth of all women, as touching the great peril and dangers which most commonly oppresseth them in their painful labours. This was a work, as we have just seen, that announced itself as being in translation. The 21st century editor of this work, Elaine Hobby, explains, however, that, quote, unlike the continental original on which it was based, it was addressed not to trainee midwives, but to a general reader, in contrast to Germany and the Netherlands, where an aspiring midwife would be examined by physicians on her relevant medical knowledge before being registered. In Britain, licensing was both much less systematic and in the hands of the church. From the first, the English translators and publishers targeted a general reader, amending and adding to the book in ways designed to promote its appeal. Furthermore, Hobby describes it as, quote, a work of singular and compelling interest. The edition of this text that Elaine Hobby chose to be the foundation for her critical edition was not the first 1540 English translation. Certainly, she had many others to choose from. For example, in 1545, the translation was taken on, amended and expanded by a physician, Thomas Raynalde. For the observant amongst you, and certainly those of you with better memories than I have, you may have noted that name Thomas Raynalde sounds familiar, because after all, he was the license printer of that first 1540 translation. However, according to the biographer I. Gadd, quote, The printer should be distinguished from his namesake, the physician. Gadd continues, explaining that the systematic and extensive revisions, including corrections to the earlier edition's medical terminology, make it highly likely that the printer and the physician were different men. The Birth of Mankind remained continuously in print until 1654. That makes a span of 114 years. Elaine Hobby chose the 1560 edition of the text for her 2009 publication, and I will leave that linked. As for that continental original that Hobby mentioned, in this she is referring to the Latin De Partu Hominis, which translates to of the birth of mankind. And this text was itself inspired by another work, this time from 1513, the title of which translates to The Rose Garden for Pregnant Women and Midwives. This text was by a German physician, Eucharius Roslin. His training would have included the study of the texts, teachings and theories of some of the best-known scholars in his discipline, and this study would naturally have influenced the work he produced. And so he is influenced by people like Hippocrates, Galen and Avicenna, and that is naming just a few. Thomas Raynalde, in turn, and I am talking about that English physician who was in charge of the 1545 version of the text in translation, he's going to make his own alterations in light of his learning. And that learning brought him into contact with the work of, for example, Andreas Vesalius, and others who were more contemporaneous to him. Raynalde's version of the Birth of Mankind is arranged into 4 books, and in the case of each book, it is made very clear what you might expect to find contained within them. Thus we are told that the first book describes, quote, the form, manner and situation of the inward parts of a woman, such as are in them by nature dedicate and assigned to the propagation, conception, and bearing of mankind. Within this first book, we are given a 13-page description of the female reproductive organs, of the womb, cervix, vaginal canal, and ovaries, which are called the woman's stones in this text. A few pages later, there is also an explanation of how the, quote, seed is sent from the stones to the angles or corners of the matrix. The fallopian tubes, or seed carriers, are said to be, quote, fastened and affixed to the body of the stones, or ovaries, which we know today is not anatomically correct. Following conception, the amniotic sac is described as being a series of wrappers filled with brine, while the placenta is explained as being akin to the roots of a tree. The second book sets out the best way to manage pregnancies and birth. It talks about when to expect a baby to arrive, how issues or complications with birth might be diagnosed or even preempted. It gives tips for women to ensure they enjoy a healthy pregnancy and an easier birth. It offers potential remedies to ease the birth and lessen pain. In this last regard, the, quote, oil of white lilies or duck's grease, mixed with saffron and musk, might, we are told, be used to, quote, anoint the secret parts of the woman. Presumably, the intention with this is, at least in part, to offer some way to lubricate the passage, to ease baby's transition from, quote, matrix into world. Various mixes of herbs and spices are also detailed. We are shown how they can make pills, ointments, perfumes, etc., all apparently with the capacity to reduce childbirth pain. Next up, there is a discussion of how to ensure the full removal of the placenta, called here the, quote, second birth. Following on from this, we have recommendations of how women might avoid postpartum complications for themselves, the possible causes of miscarriages and premature births, with ways to avoid the same, even how to manage a fetal demise or a stillbirth. In many editions of this text, the second book also includes a collection of images. First up, as we can see, there is an image of a birthing stool, This allows an infant to be birthed with the mother in an upright, partially squatting position, on a seat with evidently a large gap in it. Through this gap, not only could the birth occur, but it also allows anyone who is assisting with the birth to observe the progress of the labour. From what I learned in my childbirth classes, the position that using a chair like this would make possible is pretty much the ideal one to support the physiological process of birth. Indeed, modern versions of this chair are either available to hire or are often held in birthing centres themselves for people to use during their labour. The next images, called, quote, birth figures, shows the possible positions that a fetus, or perhaps fetuses, may present themselves in for birth. It seems possible that the intention with these images is to highlight the potential issues, but also to indicate what was going on. This might be especially useful, I think, as a practitioner could perhaps feel what's going on, but not see it. Is it possible that this could be used as a guide? That a fetus in a complex position might be safely manipulated to result in a better birth outcome? I must confess that I have found myself wondering whether there was ever a time in a birthing room somewhere where this book would have been seen propped open at these images. They would have acted like some kind of flat-pack instructional diagram, a roadmap, if you will, to get baby safely out of their mother. The third book concerns itself with infant care, things like bathing, feeding, how to deal with the umbilical cord stump, how to swaddle and dress the infant. We are also provided with a list of infant ailments, as well as ways that those ailments might be treated. In the fourth and final book, we are informed that it, quote, shall briefly be declared such things which may further or hinder the conception of man, which as it may be by diverse means letted and hindered, so also by many other ways it may be furthered and amended. Also to know by certain signs and tokens whether the woman be conceived or no. Within the main body of this final book, we are told that conception is signified by the stopping of periods, changes to the breasts, the sealing of the matrix, which refers to the female reproductive organs, but also conception can apparently be signified if pain should occur after drinking a mix of water, wine and honey, and whether the conception be male or female. Apparently, if her milk flows and spreads out, then the fetus she carries would be female. Alternatively, if it were to stand where it was dropped, then the fetus would be male. Additionally, we are told that a male child would make his mother, quote, well-coloured and light in going, her belly round, bigger toward the right side than the left, and in the time of her bearing, so during her pregnancy, she shall better digest and like her meat. And finally, certain remedies and medicines to further and help conception. And thereafter we will set forth certain bellifying recepts. This is a reference to beautifying treatments and includes ways to see off dandruff, unwanted hair, freckles, warts, spots, dull or rough skin, dirty teeth, bad breath, and BO. It appears to me that what is being highlighted here is the very real connection between successful conception and the, shall we say, comeliness of the individuals who are seeking to make a baby with each other. Perhaps, when we consider all of the information contained within this text, we can see why it enjoyed more than a century in print. After all, Elaine Hobby explains that, quote, in its essentials, this combination of ethical reflection on writing about sexuality, new science, and ancient and medieval beliefs, then continued unchanged in English for the next 100 years. Parts of it, for instance the diagrams of malpresentation, those are the images that we looked at previously of the ways in which babies might present themselves for birth, and the related text, were also copied in later midwifery manuals, such as Jane Sharp's The Midwife's Book from 1671, which was itself reprinted in 1724. The birth of mankind's afterlife was to be considerable too. So what do you think of the birth of mankind? of its intended audience, contents and legacy. Had you heard of this text before? Had you read any of it? As always, I'm looking forward to reading your conversations in the comments section underneath this video. I'd also love it if you could pop an emoji or a social glyph in the comments too, because that will boost the engagement, and allegedly, the more engagement a video gets, the more YouTube claim they share it out, and that will help us to grow our community. I think it's only fitting we do something involving pregnancy or babies. I look forward to seeing what you choose. You can also find me elsewhere on social media. I will leave links to the place you can find me on the internet in my description box. Please do follow me over on some or all of those so that we can continue this conversation and start some others. I do hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, please share it with your friends. And if you like my channel, let some pals know about it. You can tell me you like this video in particular by hitting the thumbs up. Please do subscribe to the channel, and if you think you are subscribed, have a little check now, just to make sure you have not been mysteriously unsubscribed against your will. While you are there, checking, subscribing, maybe resubscribing, please do hit the bell icon that sits beside the subscribe button, and then select all in the drop down that will appear, and that way YouTube say they will tell you when I've next uploaded, but also when I'll next be going live, which I do to talk about the history news, and I know you're not going to want to miss that. We have got our failsafe, of course. Please head over to my website. It is www.katrinamarchant.com. I will link it. If you go to the contact page, you'll find a little box. If you put your email address in that box and press submit, that will add you to my list. And that way, I can send you an email once a week to let you know what I've been up to, but also to give you some useful links for my content for the coming days. I hope you're going to have a great day, whatever you're doing, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.